Yeah, I got you. Well, let's get started, man. We'll take it from there.
All right, we'll drop hot fire. Hey guys, welcome to the
Fire.
10th episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and another co-host in the comics community discuss one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics. Whether it be stories, creators, constructs, or the adaptations, we hit them all. This week we have a special guest host, the Geek Fortress. What's going on, man? It's really great to have you on.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate the opportunity. Good to be in this awesome channel.
Hey.
And for those of you guys who may know me or may not know me, my name is Lewis. I'm from the Geek Fortress, the creator of the Geek Fortress. There's also a Facebook group that goes along with that. And we pretty much do everything geeky. We do unboxings, we do reviews, we do it all. We do comic books, we do everything except for sucking. So keep that in mind.
Very true. He speaks cold hard facts. But giving some love, we have Joey from Joseph's Books in the chat saying hey to us. What's going on, Joe?
What's up, man? Oh,
Right.
Joseph's Books. I know this guy. What's up, bro?
Yeah, he's the boy. So this week we'll be chatting Wytches, which is a horror series printed through Image. It's an independent comic by one of my favorite writers in comics, Scott Snyder, an artist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. They are the creative team also on Batman the Black Mirror, for those of you who are huge Batman fans and have gotten a chance to bask in the glory that is the Black Mirror. But yeah, this story is essentially a twist on the traditional witch theology and a commentary on like parenting, depression, and a number of other like personal and mental struggles. It's really, really great.
Oh, yeah.
The art is awesome and I think incredibly appropriate stylistically. Like what they were doing, I was just reading something earlier, and I'm sure we'll bring up later about how like the particular way that they color this book,
Mm-hmm.
and like how it's like mixed media. It's both like digital and physical. So that's
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I love the most about it is the splats on the pages. It looks like
Yep.
almost like somebody went with like a toothbrush kind of thing and just kind of splat it, but it looks good. It doesn't
Yeah.
look messy. It's like it's all part of like a beautiful disaster. That's the best
Yeah.
way I can put it.
Yeah, it's really cool. I guess like Jock does his art with like straight marker, and
Yeah.
then the color splats were like painted acrylic and oils and such. And then what
Beautiful.
they did was they did the rest of like the more solid colors like digitally, and then they used like a computer program and scanned the splats, the acrylic splats,
Mm-hmm.
and like made a composite image, and that's how you get like the color and those splats across the page.
It's beautiful. I think it's unique. I remember when I the first time that I read this, it actually took me like 20 pages in to realize it, and I kind of felt stupid because I was like 20 pages in, and I was like, wait a second, and then I went back to the previous 20, and I was like, wait a second. So it was like epiphany, and then
Yeah.
as I read the whole thing, I was like, okay, that's its thing, and I loved it. Very unique.
Beautiful, beautiful book. But before we get into that, you guys know who have come and watched the show before. And for those of you who are new, we do a poll of the week. Every week, myself and my co-host will each discuss or briefly bring up a book that we're either excited to read from this week or have read and really love. So since you're the guest, my friend, did you want to talk about a book you're excited about for this week?
Personally, it's actually something that I saw. It's not a new book per se, but I didn't know that there was Halloween comic books.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm doing is I'm trying to fetch it, even though it's impossible to find the actual book itself. So I'm trying to fetch if I can find like a digital or something like that. So I'm excited to read that more than anything really new coming out this week. Unless I don't know if I'm missing my dates right now, but I'm also reading Unnatural. I don't know if you've read that. If you've read that at all, highly
No.
recommend it, by the way. So I think there's a next issue coming out this week. And if it's not this week, I apologize. My days are all messed up. Everything becomes one blur. But those are two of the titles that I really look forward to, even though one of them it's old.
Oh, gotcha. Makes sense. I'm gonna have to say I think it's like the Witching Hour, number one,
Okay.
the finale to the Justice League Wonder Woman, or Justice League Dark Wonder Woman tie-in called the Witching Hour. It's
Okay.
just been a really freaking fun ride, and the story that James Tynion's been crafting here, I think, is absolutely incredible. I think that if you pick up from Justice League Dark from the beginning of that alone, I think it's inclusive enough to let new readers feel comfortable going into this because they take from every bit of like the DC Mystic and that type of universe.
Mhm.
And I think that it's gratifying, for someone like me or maybe someone like you, Lewis, who are really familiar with DC Comics and the
Mhm.
landscape, but they also make it accessible for people who don't have a lot of experience. Because to be fair, the DC Mystic universe is probably one of the least developed areas of DC Comics,
Yep,
and
it's
and
true.
not even that, it's also incredibly confusing because it's tied into a number of different lores.
Yep, you're right. That's actually a really good point. I never thought about it that way, but you're right. I mean, for us, people who like know the characters and stuff, we're like, oh yeah, of course, we know them, we know who they are, we know what this is. But you're right, they don't have enough exposure, and they deserve it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a really good book. So if you guys haven't been picking it up, I'd 100% suggest it. And I think, somewhat the creepy DC Mystic stuff is pretty appropriate for what we're going on with our topic today. But so yeah, Witches by Scott Snyder and Jock. It ironically, this was the first independent comic book I had ever read. Uh,
Really?
yeah, I was so like I was a huge I still am a huge Scott Snyder fan.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when I saw that like he was writing a new independent book, like I started picking up The Wake, like in the middle of The Wake.
Oh, The Wake. Oh, that was a great book. I
But
enjoyed it.
yeah, it's an awesome book. Like Scott
Yeah,
Snyder and his horror, for those of you who don't know, like that is his thing.
yeah,
Like, and that's why I think the whole like Batman Who Laughs thing is going to pay off really well, especially because again he's going to be on that with Jock, his creative partner on Witches and on the Black Mirror. But yeah, this because I could pick this up like when it was coming out, so I was like, okay, cool, like independent comic book, Scott Snyder's writing it, let's go.
I'm in. All in.
Mm-hmm.
All in.
100%. But yeah, going into the book, uh, so you pick up in in a town or in a forest with a random person inside of a tree screaming for help,
Yep.
and a little boy walks up who we soon learn is the child of the woman in the tree, and obviously she's like, "Get that rock, climb me out of here," And the art is incredibly eerie. Like Lewis had brought up earlier, like the paint splatter. I don't know how well my camera's going to be able to pick up on this, but there's a lot of like intricate paint splatter that really helps to set the tone here.
Yeah,
And
you can definitely see it. Even like on the left with the dictionary definition of witch,
mhm,
like that is such a small thing to add there. But the fact that you see like the scratches and stuff, like on the definition of witch,
mhm,
it's kind of like your opening that it's gonna be like this is a witch story, but it's not the witch story you're used to. This is not Sabrina the Teenage Witch, my man.
yeah,
We're gonna scratch that off and start from zero.
yeah,
It's
that's a
great
really
stuff.
good observation.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
and so like she's trying to crawl out of the tree, and the boy takes the rock, bashes her in the face with it, and looks at her and says, "Pledged is pledged." And then you get the caption, "Cray family, August 1919," as these long, eerie white fingers pull her back into the tree. So,
Yep.
like Lewis was saying, this isn't your mommy and daddy's witch story. This is something totally different. I'm gonna again. I will say that we're going to be going through this and skipping over some spots. So I will 100% suggest that you guys read it. This is just to give you guys a general idea of the plot and the story. But you next get we're introduced to the main character. Her name is Sailor. She's a high school student whose age we're not 100% known with, but I always assume she's like a sophomore or a junior in high school.
Yeah, those are my thoughts too.
Yeah, and her father, Charlie, and you get a little bit of a feel for their interaction. Like I was saying earlier briefly, one of the biggest things about the story is its commentary on parenting and depression and parenting a child with depression. And you get a little bit of a taste for how the father is trying to supplement more positive feelings to his daughter Sailor before she goes to her new school. Um, and so that's pretty much the gist of that.
Yeah,
She,
there's for a comic book, for a graphic novel, there's a lot of social commentary, and I love that. I mean, yes, comic books nowadays especially have a lot of social commentary, but this one is just like so in your face. Like there's a difference between like innuendo and you know what? Here's how the world it's like. So let's add some horror to it, and that's kind of what Witches accomplishes, in my opinion. Because even though there's the horror of the Witches, there's also that struggle, that internal struggle that the father is going through and that the daughter is going through, of course. And the other character that we're gonna get in a minute, it's going through as well. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Like the fact that even though it's a scary story, at some point you're like, wow, I can relate to this man. I can
Mhm.
totally see that. And I was like, wow, I might have been Sailor in high school. That was me. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I just think it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the really interesting thing is, and then one of the reasons why I love Scott Snyder is for him, he has the theology that in writing you are to be your most vulnerable and you are to include your own fears, and that's how the reader can relate to it. And I can wholeheartedly agree with that. I know his experiences with depression and anxiety are definitely present in this book and most everything that he writes, but especially because, given context, he was writing this book uh, I think after he had had his first son. So he is 100%, letting his insecurities and fears of being a new father permeate this book. And I think that this is 100% present here. So as one of the key moments, so as Sailor gets on the bus, you see a bald, disfigured person walking out of the woods saying pledge or asking pledge,
Hmm.
I should say. And that's a key part. That's the bald human being with the flannel, key part. You move over to her home where her parents are, and you learn that her father is a writer. He's writing a story that is essentially paralleling part of his journey with his daughter throughout the story. Again, I'm not going to go super into depth with that, but just know that that is one of the key framing devices. I don't know about you, Lewis, but I didn't really pick up on it until about midway through the series that this story was paralleling what was going on in their lives.
I feel like I got the hint, the gist of it, but it was one of those moments, and you're like, aha.
Mhm.
But I think I agree with you. I don't think it was something like right off the bat. I was like, okay, I get it. But definitely, but it's definitely once it hits you, you're like, holy crap, that's very smart. And it's especially because he writes like kids books, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
So it's like it looks so innocent, but at the same time, there's malice behind it because it's mirroring the story. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, it's really great. And while he's writing, a deer just randomly appears in his home, uh, only to really so a deer appears in his home only to really start puking something up and
Yeah.
essentially collapse in his
Yep.
home.
How do
Um,
you do a jump scare in a comic book? That's how.
yeah, no, well, 'cause the way he had done it was they showed the deer completely alive in one page, and then they skipped to transition the narrative maybe 4, 5, 6 pages in, and then suddenly the deer starts puking up its own guts and
Yep.
dying. But it's the strategy there I think is really poignant because the first thing you see on the page where they reveal that the deer is dying, like it is it's a splash. It's on the left side. It is like the turn page reveal. So they did a really good job at composing the issue
Yep. It's
to
true.
make that effective. But so Sailor is in her class, and one of the first things she does is she meets a character named Melinda, where they make this little bit of a joke of how their teacher is a dick brusher, and how every time he walks past the females in class, he would brush his crotch up against
Yeah.
them, which I thought was really funny. And Sailor introduces herself. The girl goes, "Well, you're pretty famous here." And she's like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of weird." And so she just gets straight to the point. She's like, "Did you kill that girl or not?" And here's where we get a flashback in time, and we learn why Sailor and her family moved. Uh, and so uh, they do this really great thing here. I really like the way they compose the panels about how you go Sailor, other girl, flashback immediately. Like the thing I really like is it's a little bit jarring, and some people might not like the way they transition between like flashbacks and like different times, but this book is very like almost Quentin Tarantino in the way that the time and the pacing of that is directed. You go from real time to flashback to ahead to I really like that strategy because you're always on your feet and you're always paying attention.
Yep. 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 100%.
But so here we see that Sailor's kind of been cornered in the woods by a bully, and the bully is just this big brooding girl, who got really mad because she got really angry because Sailor had like posted something on social media saying that bullies suck, and that was it. But I guess Sailor took it down immediately. And here you can see really well from Jock, like this one small panel at how Sailor's kind of ducking to the whole thing. Like she even
Yep.
kind of like feels bad for just posting it. And I think that's a huge commentary on depression, because oftentimes when you're depressed and really anxious to that degree, you feel like things that aren't your fault are your fault. Even to the most extreme. Um, so the essentially the bully, is saying that like I'm gonna leave a permanent mark on you. Sailor's like, why do you hate me, what's the issue? And Sailor pulls out a knife, says fuck you, and pulls out a knife on the bully Annie, and Annie proceeds to pull out a gun.
Yep.
On the next page as the reveal. She obviously is threatening to kill her and open her guts up if she doesn't strip and essentially take the knife and masturbate with it. So from the get-go, you can tell this book is not your grandpa's horror story. It's kind
not.
of not. It's I think it's like the horror there is like pretty grounded. You know what I mean? Like this is something you could almost imagine happening in the most grotesque of ways. Like this is nuts.
Yep.
It's just so visceral, and they hear you're gonna see. I'm not gonna. Well, I'll point it out here. Shit. That is like witch indication. Like witches are gonna pop up, and she cracks Sailor over the head with a gun, pistol whips her, and is like, if you told anybody, your parents, any of them, I'll kill them. And obviously Sailor's like, no, I didn't do anything. The bully Annie looks around at the tree and proceeds to get pulled in by these long, slender white hands that you saw pull that woman into the tree at the beginning of the issue. So they ain't playing. And as she asks for, like, look at how grotesque this is. Like, they pull her in and her entire body just like collapses through.
Oh yeah.
Dude, like this is nuts. This is a Halloween story, and then you just see the hole that's bored into the tree with blood splattered across it, and that's when you finally get the reveal of the deer. That's kind of like puking its guts out. Again, the way that they pace the story, because suddenly after that the deer breaks that up, and suddenly it's nighttime. And it's Sailor and her father Charlie up in her bed, and they're just talking about Sailor's first day at school. Here you really get a taste for Charlie and how supportive of a father he is, and how much he's really trying to, do what he can for his daughter. I think it's really touching because oftentimes parents don't quite understand children with anxiety and depression. You assume it's them acting out. You assume it's this, that, and the other thing, but the actual problem.
Yeah.
So I like how, at least from at this point in the story, you begin to see that Charlie's just kind of doing his best to try to cheer her up and sway the situation. So we transition back down with Charlie and his wife. He tucks Sailor into bed, and they bring up the whole move and everything, and that's just kind of a little transition piece, because we go back up. Sailor hears the chit, looks out the window, and it's a witch, Annie. And mind you, like, we're back in the present time. Sailor's moved. It's been a couple months since that whole incident happened, and she's just hanging up on the tree, and they hear a scream. The parents run upstairs, and that same disfigured person with the red flannel, who's bald, is just outside the home. And there's what looks like bones or maybe teeth in front of her. And
I believe it's a whole bunch of teeth, a whole bunch of molars.
That
was.
Yeah, Charlie runs up to the room, says, "Oh God," and that's the end of the first issue.
Yep.
Which again, like, Scott Snyder, for a horror book, obviously one of the biggest factors at making it successful is the suspense, and I think Snyder does a really great job like that compared with Jock, because they find a good way to position these different parts of the story in ways that'll build the suspense, right? Because
Yeah.
comic books, it's really easy to kind of, you open up to the left page, they'll have a reveal on the right, but you kind of catch a peek of it.
Yeah.
And that's why some people really like the guided view on something like Comixology.
Yeah.
But they do a really good job at pacing this out and paneling it. The second issue opens up with part of Charlie's book. I'm not going to go too far into depth, but it's essentially about a child who finds himself he's attaining all of his wishes. He goes into a reverse world, and things aren't what he thinks they are, or a mirror world, more specifically. And he's setting up one of those, I guess, electronic ramps for those who are paralyzed from the waist down that cannot walk, because his
Yep.
wife is that particularly applies to. And then you skip back up to the present, like at 3-4 pages in is when you finally get to the cliffhanger, and her windows Sailor's window is broken. She's on the ground, bleeding. Charlie's like, "What's going on?" And Sailor's like, "She came back, Dad. They sent her back," and she just has like this weird, disfigured, like,
Yeah. Just like a giant gush of like accumulated blood on her neck. It's weird. Kind of
yeah,
like if somebody like just I don't even know how to explain it.
yeah.
And the way they draw it, it's just like you're just like, oh my god.
Dude, it's so gritty and visceral.
Yep.
But so yeah, and she has this big lump on her neck now, and it's patched up. And again, here they transition frequently from Sailor in school to her father at the home trying to set up the machine so that his wife Lucy can get up the stairs. And Sailor, you find out later that Sailor's kind of like been a swimmer. That's always kind of been her thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in what I assume is PE or practice for swim team. And, she's all in her head, obviously, about the whole thing. And she jumps into the water, and suddenly she starts seeing like visions of her in the forest with Annie, kind of leading you to believe that whatever she did when she bit Sailor is affecting her. And we don't quite know what that is yet. But so moving forward, she's in the water. They do a lot with that paint splatter art. That's usually indicative of, some hallucination, a little bit the more horror, Aubrey aspects of everything. But it looks really, really cool.
Yeah, and it makes sense, especially when there's the one panel right down here where like she's like underwater and the splatter is blue
Yep.
right here. I just feel like it goes perfect with the water, and I don't even know if that was on purpose or an accident, but it just fits. It
Yeah.
fits perfectly.
Yeah, and what's really cool is like one panel, you're with sailors swimming underwater, and the next panel you're back in the forest,
Yep.
in the woods. I think that like too, like you were saying with the complementary blue, but then you have like the opposing like reds and oranges and purples. It just makes this feel really trippy.
Yeah.
Because you know what I
And
mean? Like,
and it's weird because I can almost feel the temperature of the water compared to like the temperature of like the woods that she's seeing.
yeah.
That's the power of color, cools, warms. I love it
Oh no, I 100% agree. It definitely elicits like an almost physical reaction to everything.
for sure.
And what's really cool is like, obviously in cinema, like they can use filters and screen flares and a number of other things to establish this, but they're able to do this in this very like painterly style that I
Yeah.
think essentially gets the same effect out of it. But Sailor gets up out of the water and she's kind of freaking out. And I guess it looks like the wound has sealed and it's now just a big lump on her neck. And the last panel you see on that page is Sailor sprinting towards an empty bus. And then you go back over to her father on the phone with her mother, and her mother's like, "Hey, like when Sailor comes home, like make sure you let me know. Something's kind of freaking me out." And he hears noise upstairs. He hears the door open. He's like, "Oh, that's got to be her." And then you transition back to Sailor, and she's stolen the bus. Like she's
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto the freaking bus, and her father's best friend Reggie like just watches her speed by, And then
Sailor?
yeah, he's like,
Is that her?
he's like, what?
Yeah.
Um, and what I again really really cool is the way that Scott Snyder and Jock direct the scene here, because immediately time wise, like you're back with Lucy. Lucy's a doctor, right? His wife who's paralyzed from the waist down. And in 3 panels, you see the moment she lost the ability to walk.
Yep.
And she's driving in the rain, and there's like this disfigured thing, which we'll learn what that is later, in the middle of the road. And then suddenly you're back with Sailor, and Sailor's crashed the bus. And what I really love about that is they're paralleling what Sailor just did in crashing the bus with. Now you assume she was in a car crash because
Yep.
she maybe tried to swerve out of the way or whatever was in the road. I really love that storytelling device.
I know. It's really good. Again, it goes down to mirroring. It's perfect. It's really good.
Yeah, no, this is Scott Snyder doing some of his best storytelling here, both in the structure and in the execution of the more micro scale things. But Sailor's running into the woods. She's like, "I know you can hear me, you assholes, and I know you're out there. You took Annie, and you're in my head. You're in my fucking neck." Like, and mind you, like I'm reading this word for word.
Yeah.
This book, like, if you're not one for foul language, this book is not for you. And Sailor's kind of breaking down. She's crying. She's like, "What do you want?" And I think with her history of like anxiety and depression, she might think that this is just another problem of hers. I think she's starting to even doubt if it's real.
Yeah.
And again, it causes an immense buildup of like insecurity, and that's when her uncle Reggie, or her father's best friend, pops in. It's like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, let's get you home." And then you hear the famous chit chit chit, the sound of the witches,
Yep.
and they turn around, and then what's cool is they parallel it, right? The next page you'd expect it to be like that reveal. Nope, it's her father coming up the stairs from his studio, his writing studio in the basement, and the redheaded, bald, disconfigured person beats him over the head with a golf club, and that gets on top of him. And then you get to see it's. I will say it'll probably be hard for you guys to pick up on this page, like the witches here. The one thing is, like, as I will say, as appropriate as Jock's art is for this book, it can sometimes get a little bit difficult to pick out certain things just because of like how like the color palette's great, but there isn't a lot of poppiness to it. It more or less, the color is here just to set the tone of the atmosphere.
Yep.
But so the witches pop out, and then again you see you finally get the reveal of her mother narrowly trying to dodge whatever was on in the thing, and that's obviously the implication that, like, okay, shit's going down. And you go back, and it's Reggie trying to defend Sailor as the witches approach, and she's kind of lost all hope. And again, transitioning back to, again, you can see that when he's like building suspense, they'll keep shifting perspective from Sailor to Charlie and then to the mother. It's very quick, and it's like you start paying more attention because you're like, what's going on? Like, this isn't the follow up to the
And it works. It works because it's such a page turner. It's crazy. Like, I remember the first time I read this, my first thought was, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
My second thought was like, "I can't put this down." I think I read this in one sitting. Now that I think about it, because usually, like, you should see the stack that I have next to my bed of all this stuff that I have to read. But I remember putting this like in front of everything, and I devoured it. It was just impossible to put down.
Oh, dude. See, the first time I read it, like I said, I was reading it while it was coming out. I think I started like issue 3, and I just picked up 2. But like rereading this today, I was very much that. Like I sat down, like I kept going. And the thing is, I'll go and then I'll be like, wait a minute, and I'll go back and reread another part of it, like that I had just reread, and it keeps you thinking.
Yeah.
Like, it really, really keeps you thinking, and that's one thing I love about it. And so, so yeah, it's Charlie and the the flannel. We're just gonna call her Bald Flannel. Bald Flannel.
I'm in. I like it.
Bald lady. And he's like, "Why are you in my daughter's room?" He's on top of her. Well, you'll learn that she's a she, but we're gonna call her she. Has like this white dust, blows it into his face, and says, "Sorry, Mr. Rooks, but you never had a daughter." And then that's the end of issue 2.
What a cliffhanger! Like if you're reading single issues.
Oh, dude, such a cliffhanger. And we did get some love in the chat from some Moki dude saying, "What's up, guys? What's going on, man? Thanks for joining us tonight."
Hello.
And so issue 3 picks up. It's a little bit hard to decipher, I will say. There are a lot of like blacks and red. Like it looks really cool. But we learn. Okay, so they transition, and it's a couple years previous. I want to say like 3 years before like the present time in the story. And Charlie, his wife, and his daughter are all in like you'd go to like the Walmart or the McDonald's playhouses, and they have like the tubes and the slides and stuff. That's pretty, or like a Chuck E. Cheese. I don't know if those even exist anymore, but
that's a good point.
Yeah, I know they're all dying on us.
Yeah,
Rip my childhood. It's okay though. I still have Batman the Animated Series. That's all I need.
That's true. That's true.
But they're in this thing, and her father just starts a match like inside this plastic playhouse, and he's like, "Boo!" And both his wife and his daughter are like, "Dude, why do you have matches?" And he's like, "You should always carry matches. It's the first rule of the zombie apocalypse. They're not teaching you this stuff in Girl Scouts. Why the hell am I paying them for that?"
Yep. Oh, by the way, foreshadowing.
Oh my God! Yeah, that's true. Very true. Yeah, because I think I had really only gotten it down to the most basic level. I was like, oh, like he said to carry matches, and later we'll get into that.
Oh yeah.
But it's funny because they go, you get in a little bit more dialogue with the family, and then they're like, put that thing out, and like I think they kind of break the fourth wall a little bit because he mentions like the splatter.
Yep.
And by splatter, like it's kind of has a double meaning, both like the splatter of a dead body and like the splatter amongst the screen or amongst the page. So let's see here. So I don't know if it's just me, and I actually used this image in the thumbnail when it's finally posted, but let's see here. So
talking about this beautiful lady.
Yeah. And the next page, I never really understood like where that was warranted from. Because oh no, wait, maybe it's his wife that sees it this time.
Maybe because just before her eyes are like wide open.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on this before. So Sailor like was about to blow out the candle, and like he pulls the match, and he pulls it away, and whoa, I just realized more foreshadowing. So he's like, he's like, okay, I'm going to blow out the candle, and I'm going to count to 20 and then come looking. If it takes me more than this, like, I'll give you like whatever you want. I'll give you a pony. I just realized like, and this won't spoil anything yet. Lewis, I just realized that's like foreshadowing the play.
Yes. That's what dude. It's crazy. Just like looking through the panels and reading a few of the lines again. See, that's the beauty of rereading something, because now that you already know what this is building up to, you're like, wow. And I think that's one of the beauties of like reading in general. Like when you go back and reread something, and you're like, I know why you said that.
Yeah,
I got you. I mean, this is one of the reasons why you guys have to read this, to everybody watching. I mean, if you haven't read it, this is like us talking about it doesn't make it justice.
Oh yeah,
to be 100% honest with you, like we could sit here and talk to you like 20 hours about this, but when you turn yourself to this page and you see this right here, and then you're just like, okay, I'm in. I'm in. And it's again, it goes back to the splatter and the colors and the almost disfigured drawing of this entity. Oh, I'm sorry. I just get so into it because I could just talk about it all day. It's a beautiful piece.
No,
it's a beautiful piece.
This story is incredible. I really can't echo enough of Lewis's sentiments here, in that as great as it is that we can talk about it and go into depth, you really won't appreciate everything until you read it because, for example, like we were saying, the way they pace the story and the way they lay out the panels and like what's happening on each page and how that, that's what gets us to turn the page. That's what's getting us excited. So in order for you guys to really, really feel that, you're definitely going to want to check this out for yourself.
Yep.
But moving on, we're in the woods. Sailors disappeared along with Reggie, and as far as we know, whatever happened with Charlie and Bald Flannel Lady is pretty much done. And so they're obviously, they're there with the deputy chief. They're screaming, looking for Sailor. And again, you get a little like the paint. This is like the paint splatter starts to get intense again. Again, like for me, I feel like the paint splatter is usually very indicative of something big about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What they're looking for, and like the police sheriff is trying to kind of muddy down the situation and say, hey, like Grand Theft Auto in the town isn't uncommon. Kids get angsty and they'll do this. Like 9 times out of 10, they're already at home before you get back there. And then Charlie brings up his encounter with Bald Flannel Lady, and the police officer's like, I sent one over. Like we didn't find any sign of a woman, but we'll keep looking. He's like, I know you took a spill, Mr. Rooks. Is it possible that your head? And obviously, like Charlie's like, no, like I'm not freaking out. Like I'm not losing my shit. Like how hard can it be to find her? Like this woman like beat him with her wooden legs. She doesn't have legs anymore.
Yep.
And again, one of the things I want to point out is like I'm not going to go through and reread all this dialogue, but I think the dialogue is great.
It is.
Like Snyder really knows. This is like Snyder with some of his best dialogue because he knows when things are like when he can really pop these jokes and get funny about them and get like witty, and when like things get real. Yeah, he's like, no, stop like trying to cover me. I don't want any water. I don't want this shit. I just want to find my daughter. And then you transition back to that night again. Scott Snyder doing something very similar where you now finally pick up on the cliffhanger, and Bald Flannel Lady's over him. She's like, you never had a daughter, and obviously he's like, what the hell's going on?
This is when we find out she's a lady, by the way.
Yeah, she pulls. I'm not going to show this like visually, but like,
yeah,
she pulls out her breast. Yep. And she says, I'm talking about your daughter. Someone pledged her over special. She has the teat in her neck. It makes her like a homing pigeon. She'll go to them if she hasn't already. And she continues, she'll go to them, and soon enough, some suckler, some goddamn townie, they'll give you the tincture, slip it in your food or drink, a retro amnesiac. The beasts make down their holes. Natural benzo. Screw up your brain just so you don't remember, just so you won't remember she existed. You'll feel her sometimes, but you won't remember what your daughter. You'll say, who? And he's like, obviously, what are you talking about? Freaking out. She's pouring something onto this needle and ends up stabbing him with it. But like you actually find out that Bald Flannel Lady is potentially on our side here, right?
Yeah.
She's like, you haven't forgotten her, like your girl, like you still remember. You find me, and he's like, I'll find you. Like why don't you just tell me now? And she's like, I'll tell you now. You'd set them on me. So you pretty much find out, from that dialogue before and here that the town is in on this. Like the town is kind of collaborating through this ritual called the pledge.
Yep.
And no one is safe, and that if she were to be sacrificed for this pledge, and we'll figure out like what is to be gained of that, the town would essentially try to make him forget about it, act like this had never happened. But he gets stabbed with the thing. Next minute he wakes up. Petal, we'll just call him Petal. He is the police sheriff. Comes in and he's on the floor like that, and then you learn that, or not even you learn that, he looks for the mark where he was stabbed. It's nowhere to be found, and then you're back in the present where they're searching for Sailor in the woods. So a lot has happened overnight. A lot has happened, and so obviously he's like, I'm gonna go look for my daughter. And the wife and Sergeant or Sheriff Petal are like, no, come back. He's trudging through the woods, and then the paint splatter happens. Like and again, it gets really intense with paint splatter. Next thing we know, someone's saying help really weakly, and he's looking, and you see someone's mouth
How
here
creepy! How creepy
in,
is that picture?
in the tree hole. It's nuts, dude. But again,
It's
you guys
like,
can see a little bit of the paint splatter that's like indicative of some creepy shit about to
yep,
happen. And so we learn that it's Reggie. It's his best friend. And he's, picking up the rock. He's about to bust him out. And then behind him is Sheriff Petal. He's like, what's going on? And then, like, obviously Charlie's like, dude, there's someone in that tree. Look. And they look and just, it's just a hole. No one's
yep.
there. And then you hear a scrunch noise, which, I guess, slight spoiler, you don't see him again. So I assume he dies here.
Yep.
Again, the paint splatter's still here. He's obviously like that thing's so hollow, like, but a dog wouldn't even fit inside of it. And they're beginning to make Charlie down himself. And we go over to Sailor's diary on October 7th. And it's the day after she had gotten like that lump on her neck. And what's really cool here is I find that both the language and the way that Sailor's writing in her journal again is reflective of like someone who's anxious and depressed. It's very short, brief, to the point. There's a house in my neck. That's what it feels like, a hollow with a second me living in there, a sick me with her own thoughts, her own dreams. All she wants is one thing, and it goes on, and like you really delve into her depression here, and that's why I kind of wanted to read through it. Sometimes I think I can hear her scream in there, screaming for her parents. I can almost see them out there in the trees, waiting behind the branches. They have faces on the sides of their heads to peek around at me. If I listen, I can hear their teeth. Mom and Dad think I'm crazy, and maybe I am. I hope I am. I pinch the lump. It's just a lump. It has no pulse, no teeth. I hope it's a tumor. Let it be a tumor. Please let it be a tumor. Someone cut it out. I don't want to go out there. I can hear their teeth at night, hungry. They go chit, 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 chit. And it's like she doesn't want this to happen anymore. I feel like what she's saying here is indicating her fear of her own mental state, thinking that what's happening here and what she's experiencing might just be another mental health issue, like the depression and like the anxiety is, and she's ready for it to be over. Like she's even, it's almost indicative of a child's suicide.
Yep.
Which I found to be pretty powerful here in the way that they moved the story. So we have the wife Lucy and Charlie kind of driving home from the woods, and we learn that we don't get a lot of detail yet, but we learn that Charlie has had a troubled past at some point, and has potentially even left Sailor and their mother at one point. They get to the house, he's screaming up the stairs, Sailor, where are you? The wife's screaming, and then you then again, like midway through the page, there's no warning. They're back in the playscape looking for Sailor. And it's reflecting what's going on in the present. He talks about kind of like how he's been trying to combat Sailor's depression as a parent and trying to just be a better father for her, which I think is cool. And next thing you know, we're back in the present. He's looking in the mirror and asking what's happening to us. And he's pretty much just about ready to believe anything. And he's, starting to tear up and look for Sailor. When the next thing, he closes his eyes and he opens. And on his stomach, in dead veins, it spells out here. And that's the area where he was stabbed by Bald Flannel Lady.
Yep.
And so he reads it, he pulls out a map, and on the map he points out a place called Here Point. It's really hard for you guys to see. But
yeah, it's very tiny on the map. But it's literally called Here Point.
Yeah. and you find Sailor. I think it looks like she's being like pulled down by some of the witches, and she strikes a match, and that's the end of this issue. Um, again, really playing at us with the suspense here, and then we get a it's the strategy here is pretty repetitive. Like I was saying with the sliding time, because you open up to the next issue and it says Rook's family, September 20th, 2011. Mind you, present day is sometime in October 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And they're at the amusement park, which, again, pay attention. When you finally read this, remember the amusement park because it parallels the story that Charlie is writing in his children's book. And you just see a shadow of Charlie up on a random seat on a Ferris wheel that's not moving. And, Sailor is on the ground just desperately trying to talk to him. Next thing, you're back in the present. He's looking at his stomach, and he's trying to show it to his wife, but it's gone. Okay.
What a mind fuck. That was
it's such a because like obviously
part of my French.
He's like it's cool. He's already worried like he's going insane, and now all of a sudden the little bit of proof he has to show his wife is disappearing. So again with the paint splatter, she's like checking out his stomach, and he's trying to explain like what was going on, like what happened that night with Bald Flannel Lady, and he's thinking that maybe whatever was in the thing that she stabbed him with was hallucinogenic, and she wipes his head with a cloth, because he's bleeding, and she's kind of trying to subside him. And you transition back with Sailor, and you see that she's been pulled under one of those hollow trees to like I guess a base. And she's obviously trying to get her bearings. She does what her dad always told her, lights a match.
Mm-hmm.
A pile of dead bodies down there. And she's just sitting on a pile of dead bodies. And it's really cool because you have this very stark situation with a lot of like muddled browns and such. And then you just get the orange of the fire. And I think the color play here is really great. You transition back to Mike or Charlie, and he's at Here Coast. It's been wrecked by a hurricane. He's in a home where he sees a couple of boiling rats, and he turns around to see Bald Flannel Lady. She's like, "What's up, my boy? You made it."
She's packing though. She's packing heat.
Oh, she's packing heat, boy.
Yeah.
She's like, pass the sticker, and we learned that by sticker she's indicating to the freaking massive knife he has hanging out the back of this thing, and she hands him a noose, a slip knot, and he's like, all right, go hang this thing up nice and high, and obviously like you think she's gonna have him, she's gonna have him kill himself, and you transition again back to the past, and Sailor is trying to talk to her father, who we learn was a stark alcoholic at this point in time back in 2011, and she's kind of like looking up at him while he's on like a non-moving Ferris wheel seat, and she's like, well, it's just that you weren't back home when I got back from school, and driving up with her mom to her grandmother's house, and he's like, you were scared, I get it, you didn't want to be alone, and Sailor's like, this place is closed, why are you here? And he's like, I used to come here when I was a kid and hop the Ferris wheel and try to see how high we would climb. And she's obviously like, Dad, why don't you come down? And like, he's like, well, I have a better idea. You guys want to guess what happens next? We go to something completely different, and we're back in the question with Sailor.
If you guess that, you guess correctly.
Yeah, if you guess that, you win absolutely nothing. But let me know down in the comments below. So Sailor's kind of like picking through the dead bodies and sees like kids' clothes. Like there is no exception to who is like dead in this pile of cadavers. And she's obviously freaking out. And then you transition back with Charlie in the present with Bald Flannel Lady. And she's like, toss the noose over the beam. And this is where Charlie begins to kind of appease her and talk about the witches. Which is spelled with a Y, by the way, very important.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, it's like these witches, they're people, you know. And you know, the bald flannel lady is like, yeah, I know them, but they aren't any people, not green skinned ladies or devil worshippers, none of that. Some of my people think their evolution. Some of my people think their evolution gone wrong. Mutations from thousands of years ago may be formed apart from us, in the ground, but lay eyes on one and you'll see they aren't like us, they're above us on the food chain. And she brings out like the skull of what I assume is the skull of a witch. And again, here reading this will give you guys a little bit will kind of immerse you a little bit more, because the dialogue, like the specific way in which bald flannel lady is speaking, I think is pretty intense. Like it's indicative, like, you know what I mean? Like the way she's talking and her mannerisms are kind of like revealing her trauma. Is that something that you picked up on?
Yep, I did actually. Now that you mention it.
Like it's very broken, very brief, very like, and sometimes because of the way like it's structured grammatically, you almost think like she's just talking crazy. It's just like hearsay, but it's all
Yeah.
relevant to what's going on. It's just the way that she's relaying it. Excuse me.
At the same time, she gives that vibe of that crazy person from like every movie who nobody wants to believe, but then
Yeah.
she ends up knowing everything, and it's like, do you know something we don't? Nah,
Oh
you're
yeah.
crazy.
Oh yeah. She definitely knows something that we don't. And some Okie dude in the chat, are you talking about Bad Egg? No, we're actually talking about the first like OG original volume of Witches. Bad Egg did come out today. I suppose I should have mentioned that as my poll of the week. But no, I haven't gotten a chance to read Bad Egg yet. But we're talking about, in honor of Bad Egg, we're talking about the original Witches. But let's see. So I'm actually going to go through most of the dialogue here. I think it's pretty important, don't you, Lewis?
I think you should.
Yeah. So back with Charlie, he's obviously asking like, why would they take my daughter? She's just a kid. And then here, bald flannel lady, our favorite character, is like they only eat those that's pledged to them. People pledged isn't missed. Like, mind you, like what I'm saying here is just the way that she talks. It sounds grammatically incorrect, but it all pretty much has a point. Kids is their favorite. Someone rubs pledge on you, and the witches come. Pull you out of your house in the night, take you back to the burrow, cook you in the cauldron. If you're young, flesh natural heat roasts you slow. Let's see here. I'm trying to move this so that you pledge someone, you get anything you want from their fucking science. Dodge illness, add years, make someone love you. They leave little sacks for you, unnatural. Now go on and test it. The noose. So like this is what we were referring to with the pledge before. So what you can gather from here now is that someone has to be sacrificed, and the witches, through some sort of blood ritual, will pretty much grant a wish for you. Will fulfill. You know, it's ultimately just wish fulfillment in honor of or in exchange for sacrifice. And he's like, test it. He's like, dude, she's 13, and she kind of like pops him on the side of the head, but like it's not like directly in it, just kind of
it's kind of like a graze, kind of like a cut graze type thing.
I'm looking for. And then again, literally just the last 3 panels of the page, you're back with him and Sailor at the amusement park 3 years ago, and she's actually climbing up the Ferris wheel. She's like, it's not going to hold, and he's like, come on, you can do it, and just a little bit higher. And then you're back with Sailor in the present. And obviously she's kind of reiterating what was happening there. Like she's trying to climb up out of the tree, saying a little bit higher, you're fucking strong. You're the slayer of mythological animals, which is a callback to like the first 2 pages of the book, or one of the first couple pages when you first meet Sailor. And then again, middle of that page, you're transitioned back with Charlie and bald flannel lady, and he's mounting the noose over a support beam. He's like, it's done. And bald flannel lady's like, what do you think? Should we hang someone? And surprisingly, next page, the stinger, she's like, get out of my way. And she's about to mount herself up onto the noose. And she says, I came here to burn the town borough, Mr. Brooks, or Mr. Rooks. Heard it was a bad one, Litchfield. Rumor was it was deep as they go. Even got rooted ones down there. They warned me not to come. Heh, too late now. I got the mites, see? Witches grow 'em in their hair, parasitic. Some townie slips them into you. They get in your head, make you want to fucking off yourself. Tried cooking blocker, but the mites are strong too. I don't do it now. I'll do it in my sleep, rather by my fucking hand. And then he's like, obviously, please, like my daughter, I want to know what you know. And uh, Bald Flannel Lady's like, your daughter's being cooked alive right now. You find someone, traffics with them, the witches. You make them tell you where the tinctures is left. The burrow entrance won't be far off. So I'm kind of reading this like it's like me trying to process bad grammar.
Yeah.
But obviously he's like, no, please. And she pulls out the gun, like trying to prevent him from stopping her killing herself. She's like, no, there's a satchel under the boards, has stink in it. It's a run I made. See, my people learned some of their works. It makes you invisible to them while it lasts. You slather it, go down into the burrow, and get your daughter. There's names in there, too, a list. Almost everyone in this fucking town. You dodge everyone on it. You do get your daughter out, which you won't, but still. You get her, you find the irons, they'll help you. Just because my name was Clara Poirot, spelled French. I was a girl when they got me. I was 7 fucking years old. Blonde as scrambled eggs, they ate my legs, but I got away. I burned their homes, burned them where they lived. And then he's like, where do I find the irons? He's like, go where there's no trees. And she mounts the noose around her neck, drops, eyes bloodshot, and that's the end of our favorite character. The story's over. Good night, folks. We'll see you on the next episode. But no, in all realism, you go back and it's Charlie with Sailor climbing up the Ferris wheel here.
That
And
definitely marks like the end of Act 2, going into Act 3, though. If you think about it,
oh yeah,
like I think we've hit the final curve, if anything, you know.
yeah, no, I'd 100% agree. We're definitely like coming to the climax of the story.
Yep.
We're at the top of the rising action here, and literally while Sailor is rising up this Ferris wheel, and she's obviously like like begging her dad to come down, and it's like really shitty. Like you can, the thing is, it's a great stark contrast because in the present day, like Charlie is doing his best to be a father and trying to acclimate to his daughter's depression and anxiety. And here, like you learn, he wasn't always like this. He was actually pretty much a shitbag that, through his own anxieties, kind of rendered him unable to be able to coach his daughter and be there for his daughter in the way that he would have needed. And he's actually doing the exact opposite. He's like, today we're both brave. Now get up here and we'll carve your name in the wood. I'll break this glass today, and we will today, as she's climbing up. And she's obviously like, no, it's too high. And like, mind you, she's probably a good 40, 50 feet. She's like,
Yeah, that's a
midway.
big Ferris wheel.
She's like midway up through the Ferris wheel. And he's like, you can do it. You're almost past me, Sail. Look how high you are. Keep going. And then you're back with Charlie in the future. And he recovers the satchel that Bald Flannel Lady was talking about, has the list of names, and has the jar, the pledge. You find out like she made this stuff that's like a witch attractant that like marks someone that you're pledging.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I assume is pictures of Bald Flannel Lady with her parents and some rat bullets. And he's back in his home while he's kind of reviewing and going over all this stuff, and his wife just kind of rolls in and is like, yo, what happened to your homes? And so here what's really cool is literally almost every other panel or so is a transition between the present with Charlie and his wife and Charlie and Sailor back 3 years ago while he's hammering on the Ferris wheel. And she's like, Dad, I'm right here. And then his wife, she's like, what the fuck's going on? It's really cool. Like, this is again one of those moments where like you end up having to pay a lot of attention, but it pays off. He's trying to like explain like what happened, like what just happened with Bald Flannel Lady. and he's like, I'm scared, Lucy, and he's like on his knees in front of her. And then you're back in the past with Sailor and Charlie, and she's like, Dad, like help me, I'm scared. And he's like screaming. And here's where you get the first big hint of Charlie's trauma. He's like, stop it, stop being such a chicken shit for once and do it. You don't fucking get it. I believe in you. It's because this is like the biggest indication that he has some of the same problems that Sailor experiences. He was anxious and depressed, and he feels so unequipped as a father to be able to help her get through that. So he's obviously finding a way to cope with it in drinking, and he's kind of trying to force Sailor to overcome these things because he thinks that that'll make Sailor better than he ever was.
Yeah.
And I think it's really powerful because, I mean, there's just a number of things that make that powerful. You know what I mean? When you're depressed and you're in that state of mind, you almost feel like everything's clogged. And what I love about this is they kind of use the paint splatter to illustrate that. However, it doesn't feel like you don't feel in control. You feel like there's kind of this haze around you and you're just reacting to everything. And I really, really love how they incorporate that here. But yeah, so she's climbing. She's like crying. She's like, Dad, help me. And he's like, I said, I believe in you, goddammit, as she's climbing up. And then you go back briefly with Sailor, kind of like paralleling the situation, trying to climb up the tree. It's like, yeah, she's like, fuck them, you can do this. And again, back with Charlie, with his wife, he's like, it feels so real. What if it's real? Like the things down there. And then back in the past with Charlie and Sailor, she's climbing and she's actually going farther than her father did. Like she's accomplishing and going farther up there because, again, one of the key things was Charlie had brought up how they used to climb this and see who could get the highest.
Yeah.
On the Ferris wheel, and she's climbing higher than he was. And she's like, you want me to go higher? She's like, fine, fuck you. I'll go right to the top. Like literally, I'm reading word for word. And you know, the wife again trying to console Charlie in the present. She's like, Charlie, don't be ridiculous. There's no such thing as monsters. And you see a witch. Again, maybe I'll pick up on something. They show like, so this is the transition, right? So you see, you know, you're going between
that's them noticing that she was climbing up, I believe. In the next page. Sorry, I'm a page in front of you.
No, it's all good. So I was just showing the guys watching. So this is where you're at, right? You end it with those three. And then the next page, as you know, I'll turn the page here and you see a witch.
Yep.
And I don't quite know, maybe you'll help me kind of like pick up on this. So what were you saying? Who's seeing the witch exactly?
I think that it's present time because you know how she was climbing up? I think it's them realizing that she's trying to escape. Because you can see like the cave.
The witch is she's at the top.
Yeah, and because she's climbing up right now. That's the mirror of her climbing back in the day and her climbing up the tree trunk or whatever she is that she's stuck at. And this is the witch is actually realizing that she's trying to get away.
Oh, see, I didn't pick up on that. That's really.
Yeah, and as we're gonna see in a few more panels, you see that she falls down, and the moral here is that her dad is always going to be there to catch her, kind of thing, which will reflect in a few pages as well. But we'll get there. We'll get there.
Her father so that's awesome. I'm really, really glad. Thank you for that. So you see,
no worries, dude.
And it's the witches seeing her as she's climbing, as she gets to the top of the tree, and she's almost out. And then you go back to the past immediately, and it parallels what's going on, and she falls. Her father catches her because she had climbed even higher than him. And then the next page is a splash, and it's his wife just sitting at the table. She's like, but tell me one thing. Who's Sailor? And I don't know if you guys remember, but earlier, Bald Flannel Lady, our favorite character and sponsor of the channel, of course, was like, you know, they'll do something new. They'll make you forget whoever was being pledged. And so that's the big stinger at the end of issue 4. Issue 5, you begin, and it's like, you know, those like pain meters or like those dislike meters. They're in a hospital, and that's what you see. And it's really just a little plot device on kind of like depression. I think because it keys in the worst pain possible and how like depression and anxiety can sometimes make everything feel way worse than it is.
Yep.
Which is awesome. Very, very nice subtle nod. And it's obviously like him freaking out. He's like, this can't be happening right now with everything going on. Like our daughter is our daughter is has been kidnapped. Like she's gone. And then Sheriff Petal kind of pulls up. He's like, everything okay? And then this is where like you start to think like maybe Petal is one of the townspeople that's like rooted and
Yeah.
that's kind of working for the witches. And like he's screaming, he's like, everything's not okay. He's like, please, like, remind my wife who my daughter is. And he's like, oh, sure, I'll do it. He's like, just come down and let's make things sweet first. Now you got a cut there on your head, and he's like, sweet. And he looks at the list, and he sees the name in like pretty much in bold, and it's Petal. It's Sheriff Petal is one of the people that is in fact rooted. And earlier when they had shown the list, the bottle of pledge, the shadow from the bottle of pledge was actually covering his name.
Yeah.
He didn't know it before. So a fight ensues. Petal pulls out the gun. Charlie ends up getting the upper hand, pulling the gun, and he's like, "You're gonna take me there to my daughter." And Petal is just like, "Yeah, sure, anything you say." And we're back with Sailor. She's in the she's back down in the tree, and she's trying not to pass out. Whatever's down there in the tree, like I guess there's a certain heat that is really getting to her, but she breaks her glasses and stows part of it in her pocket, and that's actually pretty key for later.
Mm-hmm.
But she's obviously again trying to live by the lessons that her father taught her. She's like, you can do this, being very motivational.
Survival. It all comes down to survival.
Yeah. No, it's kind of like it would. I mean, I think what it's trying to say here is even though like what her father was doing in the beginning was extreme,
Mm-hmm.
like she learned the lesson, because earlier on in the story, one of the things that we didn't go super into detail with was the fact that he was still kind of trying to teach those lessons, but in the present he had found a more relevant and a more efficient way of doing it without obviously like risking his daughter's life. And you can tell that really stuck with her.
Yeah.
And so obviously like Petal is kind of instigating with Charlie as he's leading Charlie to where he needs to go to find her, and he ends up pistol whipping the motherfucker like he's getting mad.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, I'll put a bullet through your face. And they're continuing on, and he's like, hey man, we're here, look up, and it's this big tree filled with witches.
Yeah, that's a really, it takes both pages too.
Yeah, it's this double page.
It's a beautiful shot. Beautiful shot.
Yeah, for those of you guys watching, it's this big double page splash. And again, it is a little bit hard to see the witches just from the camera.
Yeah.
But they're definitely there.
Something that's worth mentioning, if you think about it, these witches, they grant people wishes almost in exchange of something. They live in an underworld basically. Does that remind you of anything? Kind of like a portrayal of hell almost.
Hell. Yeah.
These are like demons who grant people wishes in a way, and instead of their soul, they basically pay by sacrificing somebody. It's crazy, right? It's like this. It's symbolic of hell and punishment and all of that. That's crazy, like whether you believe in hell or not, or whatever like other mediums you've seen. Think about that. It's like it actually, as I'm thinking about it right now, it's hitting me. And the fire down below under the trees and everything.
Yeah,
I just got a mini mind explosion right
there. No, that's really awesome that you point that out. And again, here with Petal, he kind of accentuates what we were learning earlier about the pledge. And he's like, word for it, he's like, you need to switch teams, my man. He's like, I'm telling you, wishes come true, anything you want. Hell, you know how old I am? You'd never guess. You could cut rings and open me up and count the rings. I can get up, boy. I can get up from anything, thanks to them.
Yep.
And so we get the reveal of the tree, and then we go back again, another transition to a time that we've been going through, and it's her Sailor's mother in the hospital right after she was in that car accident. And it's just after, we assume that this is there's a potential here that I think that the whole scene with the Ferris wheel was happening at the same time as Sailor's mom being in the accident. And now, with the accident, obviously it was a big shock to Charlie, and he's kind of trying to be back in her life. And he's trying to reach Sailor, and she swats him away. So that, this is just kind of her reacting to her whole situation with her father. And then we're back in the present with the sheriff and with Charlie. And, again, Sheriff Petal's trying to edge him on. But one thing we learn here that's really cool is we learn that the scent of ginger was the biggest indicator of them being close to the witch's lair. So he says, ginger. The ginger is the giveaway. Ginger doesn't grow on trees. It's a plant, but they make it grow to mark the portal. Hence the myth of the witch in the gingerbread house. Ta-da.
Ah, look at that.
Yeah, dude. I thought that was really, really freaking cool.
That is.
I never, I feel like that's such a great way for Scott Snyder to build on, the lore of witches. And
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic.
The way he connected that was awesome.
Yeah, it's like the craftsmanship that's going into this story, I think, is absolutely incredible. So he's like, remember to, so basically the stuff that bald, or I guess we can call her Clara, but I kind of prefer calling her Bald Flannel Lady. What do you think?
Bald Flannel Lady for the win, bro.
Okay, so Bald Flannel Lady, he opens up the jar of the stuff called stink, which is to prevent the witches from sensing him, and he starts to lather it all over his body. And
it's like a very good Rambo moment. You feel like, like he's going to war.
Oh yeah, and he has the rat bullet, so we learn that Bald Flannel Lady was cooking those rats to put their insides inside the bullet. And witches can't take animal proteins, which I thought was really, really interesting, even though humans are animals and they eat animals, which I thought. And so, obviously, so Petal again is egging him on, and he's like, yeah, your kid's fucking dead. There's no way you're going to escape. Charlie shoots him, and he's like, get up from that, asshole. And he climbs up the tree and kind of starts to drop down the pit. And the next page, we're back in that scene with a young sailor kind of waiting for the results on her mother, who we learn becomes paralyzed from the waist down. And it's a pretty heartfelt moment because Charlie, realizing the error of his ways, is trying to reconnect with his daughter. And she's like, you can't just come back after being gone for so long and after not being my father. She's like, that's what it's like. But for weeks, when she wasn't well, I guess it seems like he really left her in one of her greatest times of need, potentially during a big episode of depression and anxiety. And, you really get to the full extent of her mental trauma. And she's like, you think I wouldn't change myself? You think I wouldn't run a hot poker around my head and change my brain normal? Because I would. And then he's like, Sailor, you don't need to. And, she's like, you're not even really here. You're not my dad.
Ouch.
And again, we transition back into the present with pretty much him ready to sacrifice everything to find Sailor. And you really get a taste. And I think that stark contrast is really what gives you a taste for the development in Charlie's character over the years.
Can we talk about that Ferris wheel tattoo that he's got on his right shoulder?
Yeah.
It's so symbolic because he was such an important part of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Again, another thing I just realized.
Yeah, that was something I picked up on earlier because I remember seeing the Ferris wheel tattoo early on, and then the whole Ferris wheel thing. And it's what's funny too is something that bringing up the Ferris wheel you just made me think of is that the Ferris wheel is kind of indicative of depression.
Yeah, up and down. Yeah.
So Scott Snyder is really chalking this thing full of symbolism and metaphor for the depression.
I love it.
Anxiety.
I love it.
Really, really great writing. And Sailor's like, you don't even exist anymore, and that's where we transition back. And he's like, he's going full fucking Rambo, full Frank Castle looking for his daughter.
Yeah.
And you get the infamous chit of the witches as they're feasting on some body, and obviously, Charlie assumes it's his daughter, kind of realizes that it's not, and he steps on a twig or something, and they turn around, look at him, and then again we're back in the past, and she's yelling at him because saying that like this isn't you. It's like the dad you're not the dad I could always count on, even if I was being a total freaking idiot. That person's been missing for weeks. So this is where we learn that he had kind of been stuck in his alcoholism for quite a while during a very formative and trying time in Sailor's life. And this is where we get a little bit more into Sailor's mental state. She goes, you know what the saddest thing is? I wanted to be a big sister. I wanted you to have another kid who wasn't like me. And like the whole time, like she felt like she was letting her parents down because she was depressed and anxious. She thought it was her. And I think that rings so true, to the stigma of depression, because a lot of the time, those who are depressed and feel that way can't help but think that, and oftentimes I can't speak for everyone, feel like everything is their fault. And it's really trying and sad to see this child feel this way. And this is, again, I think this is obviously the big turning point for Charlie as a parent, because he realizes that like through him being an asshole, like she really did suffer, and more than just emotionally, but mentally. But Charlie's kind of making his way through, and then we kind of have, we learn that Sheriff Petal really is alive. He can't die, and he's kind of up there outside the tree, disfigured, and he's like, "You're getting warmer," and he narrates what's going on here. Let's see here.
It's so crazy because as the reader, you're reading this and you're like, "Oh my god," because you gotta think about it. These witches can show up at any moment, or he doesn't know also that Sailor is alive. Like as the reader, we know, but him, he is like, it's all or nothing for him,
Yeah, he's doing all this just for the chance to see his daughter, which I think is huge. And what's great here is the panel of this page. He's like, I've never wanted any other child but you, and that's never been more true. Sincerely. And as he's making his way through the cauldron or the witch's lair, you get his narration from the past saying that your bravery, your intelligence, your anxiety, and the panic attack, your panic attacks, all of it, you're just the kid I ordered. And that's when he finally finds Sailor kind of unconscious atop of the pile of bodies. And like this is where like he really connects with his daughter. That was really symbolic, because this is when a father who's kind of struggled to understand her and really, really, really put the time into doing so has connected with her, and he like finds his daughter back in the present. Again, really, really masterful storytelling and pacing. And then you just get this splash page of the past, and it's just him embracing Sailor, and we'll get out of this together. And the next page is him with his daughter, like hugging her. He's like, we gotta go, we gotta move. And you realize that because of all the heat down there, the stink that he had rubbed all over himself to keep himself from being detected from the witches is sweating off. So he's literally right behind enemy lines with nothing to do but run. And so that's the end of issue 5, and we start directly back up with issue 6. And this time, actually, this is the one issue where he's kind of decompressing everything and coming down. And actually, I couldn't even call this all decompressing, but we're getting all the payoff, so there isn't any crazy trickery with the narrative. And they're trying to run and get out of there, and they climb up out of the first hole. It's almost like freaking Donkey Kong, like when he's like throwing the barrels down the thing.
Yes. You gotta jump it. Yep.
You're trying to jump up the levels, and it's funny because you get another one of those captions, the Rooks family, October 10th, 2014. And it's like, this is them. Like they are more family now than ever before.
Yeah.
facing these trials here. And so, they hear witches coming from one direction, so obviously they try to walk the opposite. And again, you go back to the whole match. What's the word I'm looking for?
The connection to the previous statement, like that was the
Yeah.
symbolism before, the foreshadowing, excuse me. So this is where it connects.
Yeah, the foreshadowing. There's also Jesus.
I know there's a word and I can't get it either.
It starts with an M. It's not metaphor, but it's when something like repeats throughout. I feel like it starts with an M. I don't know. It's gonna bother me. I'll probably look it up at the end of this video. But
You'll be texting me later, like I found it.
Yeah, that'll be me. Like, damn, it's not like on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna.
I hate when that happens. But anyways, go on.
So he lights a cloth that he soaked in some sort of alcohol, and he's like, "Come on, magic candle!" And he throws it down the pit, and there are like these huge witches, like rooted into the walls there. And he's obviously like, "What the hell?" And then the witches just attack him. They come up out of nowhere, like what Lewis was saying earlier. They can literally appear out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is probably the most like action you'll see, and it's him just like fighting off the witches with like the sulfuric flares and the rat bullet gun. And this is kind of right here is kind of indicative of kind of Charlie coming to the peak of his growth as a character. And just to let you guys like visually see like how much shit they're in, like they are surrounded everywhere. They are surrounded. And so let's see. So he's just like, hey, like there's like a route that you can climb up over there. She's like, get to it. I'm right behind you. And he's like, this is another great bit of wordplay, because it's like he says, she's ours and we took her back, now leave her alone. This is also like the metaphor of him taking his daughter back from the depression and the anxiety and the monsters inside of her that
Absolutely.
have kind of been tugging at her, and they make their way out, and they're running away from the tree. The witches are kind of tailing after them. They were able to stall a little. And again, this next page is just back like before his book came out. It was about a year before present day, and he talks and again you get to see like how he's grown as a character, and how the representation of his daughter and his familiar relationship has become a big part of his life and a big part of his motivations. So again, you guys definitely should read this, because the way that they're paralleling the present with the past and how that's indicative of the struggle that these characters are going through, and even the growth that these characters are going through, is amazing. So again, pick up this book. So he's looking for Lucy, his wife, and she finds him in the home, and bullets are flying through the window. And it's Petal and a couple of the other townspeople that are pretty much followers of the witches, and who have assumedly engaged in the pledge. And obviously, like, so it's like, what are you gonna do? Like, he's just been shot in the shoulder, and he's thinking, and she's kind of like, oh, like the basement, like there we might be able to use the things from the satchel that Bald Flannel Lady gave them. And she's, Sailor's trying to come up with a game plan, and then fucking her mother smacks her over the top of the head, and she falls down into the basement.
Now, I almost feel like we shouldn't give this reveal.
Oh man, like I want
you guys
to read this. I want you guys.
I know.
So actually, I'll reveal what happened.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna give why it happened.
Yeah.
Because I want to leave
everybody
watching this like on a cliffhanger, so they go pick up this book.
I like that.
So he's like, Luce, what the fuck are you doing? And she goes, well, it's simple, Charlie. And she goes, I'm saving us. And she stands up out of the thing.
Yep.
And you find out here that she was the one who pledged Sailor. Her mother was the one that pledged Sailor. Now, we're about halfway through the sixth issue. We've pretty much made it through most of the series. But because I really want you guys to read this and support this book because it's really cheap. It's really, really, really cheap. You can get this trade for like $10, not even.
Yeah.
We're gonna close out like our reading of the book. It's amazing. Like it pays off, and I know you're gonna want to know why.
Oh yeah, and the last like 10 pages or so are like a page turner.
Oh, dude, it's like the climax doesn't really start. Like you don't really go towards the falling action until like the last 3 pages, and it's great.
Yeah. Because at this point, just based on what we're telling you guys and based on what we're reading out loud, you're like, there's no freaking way they're getting out of this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, I'll show it to you guys again. Like his mother, or her mother's just standing. Like she was the one that pledged Sailor to the witch. And you guys will have to read it to find out why. This book is freaking incredible. It is so freaking incredible. And for, I can't say enough, and I love how flawed these characters are. I love how absolutely flawed these characters are because even though, you probably see things in them that you wouldn't see in any normal person, it really just accentuates the point that Scott Snyder's trying to get off here, I think.
I agree 100%. It's just beautiful. It's beautifully written. And you can dissect it and you can make like charts about this and write your own pages about how incredible the writing is and the art and the symbolism and just now looking at it again, the two of us, like our reaction right now of the epiphanies we got are legit. Like I didn't a couple of things I was like,
oh yeah,
because I had completely missed the first time around. It's so weird.
No, I mean this was the third time I've read it, and again, it took really like Lewis and I going back and forth to pick up on some things, and especially like the symbols. Like Scott Snyder really ingrained a lot of symbolism in here, and I think it's absolutely amazing that reading this through the second, third, fourth time, like we're just picking up on this now.
I know it's crazy, and you know what? We probably have to read it 3 more times so we can pick up on even more stuff.
Oh no, I don't disagree at all. I think there's probably more to it. Hopefully by then I'll remember what that word was that I was trying to use. But
you'll remember. I have a feeling you'll remember at some point tonight. I'm gonna get a text at like 2 a.m.
Probably.
You're gonna be like, Eureka!
Yeah, essentially. I mean, I don't know, for you, like what was like your initial reaction when reading this book?
Honestly, like I told you, I read it in one sitting. I first thought it's the different kind of horror. It's not the horror that you're used to. It's not the technically it is monsters, but it's not like, because you hear witch, you think of pointy hat, brooms, and even though they kind of try to keep the lore alive in this one, like some of the same, like yes, they cook in pots, they have cauldrons, they have caves and stuff like that. It's not the witch that you're used to seeing, like in Supernatural, the TV show, or in Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. It's such a fresh take on it that I think has aged very well.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a book that I would recommend to people. And like when my children are of age, someday show it to them and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, they'll definitely have to be of a certain age.
Exactly. Hey, Timmy, happy 10th birthday. Here you go.
Here's a commentary on depression and, gruesome witch stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. But no, man. And, I mean, my thoughts on it now, a year later from when I originally read it, it's still the same. I mean, if even better now, I think. It's definitely a book that you should grab. And like you said, for $10, you can't go wrong.
But honestly, I just found it for $7.
Nice.
On Amazon. And for those of you watching this now or later, it's in the description, and I put it in the live chat. You can get it for $7, and a small percentage of that actually goes towards supporting the channel. But like, forget that, dude. You're getting a full trade for $7. That's kind of
Absolutely.
that's very,
Absolutely.
you figure the average trade's probably $17-18 nowadays.
Oh, dude, it's crazy. Sometimes they even go up to 25. Like something
Yeah.
like this thick, it would be $25.
Yeah.
It's crazy. That's why I mean, of course, it's I hate to like advertise things, but Amazon is really good.
No,
I
it's
mean,
great.
they have some great stuff, and the prices that they have on books, like I love Barnes and Noble, for example. I love that store. It's my favorite store. I love the smell of the store, the atmosphere of the store. But I wish I could buy there more. But Amazon has so many good deals, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And something too that I did want to bring up in the chat, some OP dude says he's jealous that Snyder came up with such an original idea. Yeah, Snyder really came up with a great way to craft his insecurities about his own depression and anxiety and being a new parent and a number of other things into this really great enthralling story. You know, it's difficult to really succeed at any one part of storytelling, whether it be, you know, getting across certain thematics or establishing like a great interesting story that keeps you hooked, or making characters that you know that you want to continue to read. And the beautiful thing here is that Scott Snyder does all three of those things. And again, the collaboration with the artist Jock and the way that the two of them collaborate to direct each scene, you know, like especially with the pacing, like we were saying, the way that they pace it and the way that they delinearize your reading process and how you're going back between different moments in time with these characters to mirror the present is awesome.
It is. It's
Amazing.
excellent.
Like
It's an experience and a half.
like some readers or some writers can't even establish that with a linear timeline, like when they're crafting a linear story. And he's doing this with this very Tarantino-esque kind of jumping timeline, and I absolutely love it. And what's great is not only is it cool to see that, it assists in the storytelling, it assists in the way you're seeing the characters, it assists in the way you're seeing the story. And ultimately, like as crazy and cool as this like mythic story about witches is, the commentary on like the anxiety and depression is the most prevalent part through the whole thing, and it's very, very, very obvious of that.
It
So
is.
it's incredible, man. I absolutely love this book. Like I said, this is my first indie comic book.
That's all. That's a heck of a first one, man.
Yeah, it's incredible. One thing I wanted to discuss a little bit, because I don't think we talked a lot about, was Jock's art here. Like
Yeah.
what are your do you think your opinion of his artwork in this book has like changed in any way from like the first time you've read it to now, or even from other projects you've seen him on versus this project?
Honestly, I feel like now that I feel like I said before, we're dissecting the book right now, and just
Mhm.
like looking through some of the pages while you were reading, and I was following with over here where I'm at, and I was looking at some of the artwork, and I'm in love with it. It really is good. Like the witches, the like there was a point where they were like on the underground where you can actually see in the background like a half cut up girl hanging like this, like in
Mhm.
like a crucifixion type of thing, and like I didn't notice that last time. Like there's always more details to notice, and sometimes there's stuff hiding behind the splatters.
Mhm.
So you can sit there and like go panel by panel, and you'll find something good and new every time. And Jock's style is just amazing. It's definitely something that sticks with you, and you're gonna follow in any other story he makes.
No, you make a great point. You know, the only downside I would say, and I don't, I think this is largely pretty negligible, because the book really makes you pay attention with the way they
Mm-hmm.
pace it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some moments where I will say like stuff gets caught in the background. You
Yes,
know,
because it seems like there's too much stuff going on at times. That's which brings me to my point of looking out over again. Like in in the moment when you're reading the book and you're so anxious about seeing what's gonna happen next, you can miss a lot.
Mhm.
That's what it is. You can definitely miss a lot. Now, when you go back, you dissect it. You already know what's gonna happen. You're not in that nail biting state. You know, you're like, holy crap, I missed that. I missed that. I missed that color. Like the
Yeah.
thing with the blues in the water. I didn't notice that last time. I
Mhm.
was just like, oh my god, she's in a pool. She's gonna drown. Like
Yeah.
that was my thought. So, but yeah, I do agree with you on that. I do agree with you with that. It's good art nonetheless, but it could be overwhelming at some points in some panels.
Right. And ultimately, I really wouldn't take it back. I think that what they do here between like the cool acrylic paint splatter and like the actual line work is awesome. And the way that, because they really, for me, they really help to establish the scene and I guess the emotion that the creative team are trying to manifest in the storytelling. So I don't think it's negative. Like I really can't be super convicted in saying that it's a negative thing that I can't see those things, because I feel like what's making that happen is also really elevating the story in other ways.
I agree.
But
I agree. I mean, it's part of its charm, if you will.
no,
It's
it is
yeah.
100% part of the charm and part of the aesthetic. Jock's artwork is incredibly stylistic, and it like this was the book that made me love Jock's artwork. I had read the Black Mirror, and I was like, man, like his artwork's kind of like meh. Like it's
Hmm.
very stylized. For me, like when I was newer into comics, I was very much into like the Jim Lees and the David Finches and the very like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
house comic book artist. But like after reading this book, every book I see Jock on now, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Like the way that they stylize this. Like in particular, if you guys were reading All-Star Batman, not All-Star Batman and Robin by Frank Miller, but All-Star Batman post Rebirth or in the beginning of
Hmm.
Rebirth, Scott Snyder, there's this awesome one shot with Batman and Mr. Freeze with art by Jock, and it has some of my favorite Jock artwork. But the visual artistry here and the way that Jock kind of directs the mannerisms of the characters, the slumping, the perched neck, it is really, really, really great at indicating, the emotion of the character, especially like I brought up earlier with, how Sailor, you could tell like her posture, like she was slumped like the whole time. She's not very confident. She doesn't carry herself proudly. And it's
Yep.
the small stuff like that that really, really helps to convey the message that the storytellers are trying to do.
And it works, man. It works fantastically. I mean,
Right.
I definitely feel like the story it's a very smart story. I definitely think that you can't just go reading it willy nilly. You need to like pay full attention to it. It's one of those stories, and like we were just saying, it might take 3, 4, 5 times. It's like watching Interstellar or Memento. You need to watch it like 6 times in order to fully grasp exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's this story is amazing. Again, if you guys haven't read this, there's a link in the description to check this out. It's only $7 from the link on Amazon. The channel gets a little bit back. So you not only do you get to read a great book at a great price, but a little bit of that comes back to the channel. And I really can't stress enough how powerful the writing is here. Everything about this book is so well crafted, from the pacing to the narrative to the overall, the development of the characters to and just everything about this book I think is incredible. One of the things I like to do too is normally I'll give a book a rating out of 10. Since you're the guest, Lewis, what would you give Witches out of 10?
Hmm.
And then also give like some closing comments on your thought about the book.
If I had to give a strict, like not only as a comic book lover, but as a critic, in a way, like if we take the book has so many goods that if you find a bad, like we mentioned before, the thing that sometimes there's so much going on that you may miss it.
Mhm.
But even with all of that, I dare say that this book is like a solid 9 out of 10. And
No,
the
I
only reason why I probably lose, like I almost want to say almost 9.5, like 9 to 9.5 out of 10. And I want to say the reason why it loses that 1 point, it's probably because of that same factor that you mentioned before. Um, and I love the art, I love it all. The writing is fantastic, but it's not even like, honestly, it's just almost like trying to find something wrong with it, because it almost feels like it's near perfect. And this is like this is why I personally hate about like rating things. Like I do it all the time in my channel because I do movie reviews and I also review from 1 to 10. And sometimes I feel like, oh my god, do I really, just for that little detail and stuff? But always be your own critic. That's what I always say as well. Don't take our words for it. I'll give it a 9 to a 9.5, but for you it may be a 20 out of 10. You know?
No,
Yeah.
no,
So
you make an excellent point. Finding problems with this book is very nitpicky.
yeah.
I would probably give this book somewhere between like a 9.2 to a 9.5. It's excellent. It's definitely an A. And, I really can't say anything more without continuing to reiterate what I've said. The craftsmanship in the storytelling here is incredible, deeply personal, masterfully executed. The artwork, really, really is stylistically appropriate here to the atmosphere of the storytelling. So if you guys haven't read it, make sure you go check it out. And again, plug, link in the description below to go buy it for like $7, super cheap. And it's definitely not money that you'll regret spending. But
it'll go in your collection and it'll be there forever. Honestly, it's
100%. I actually have Wytches #1 signed by Scott Snyder. So
very nice.
That's one of my jewels.
Nice.
But as we're closing out, I do want to recommend that you guys obviously check out Volume 1. If you've already read Volume 1 of Wytches, Bad Egg came out today, which is kind of going to be the crossover between this first volume and the second volume. It's like an intermediate story. So go check that out. Pick it up at your local comic book shop. Go support them.
Always support your local comic stores, guys. Support the art of the written word. Don't let digital take over. I mean, I just love physical. That's just me.
No, 100%. Go make sure to support your local stores and the artists and creators that craft these stories. Second of all, I wanted to give a big thanks to you, Lewis, from Geek Fortress. You
it's
have
my
been
pleasure.
An awesome co-host tonight, and it's been a pleasure chatting Wytches with you and dissecting the story. And really, I feel like through talking and dissecting the book together, we've really bounced a lot of great ideas off of one another. And both of us, I feel, have gained an even greater understanding and appreciation for this story.
Absolutely. Definitely a better grasp on the story itself, on the art, on the symbolism behind it. Like I said, the social commentary. It's like I said before, it's a beautiful piece. If I had to give a closing statement, just go to the description, the link, get it. Guys, get it. It's definitely worth it. And if you think we're wrong, tell us. I mean, we're willing to take that gander, but I don't think we are. I really think it's a page turner, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it.
Right. One thing I'll leave you guys with too. Let us know down in the comments what you guys think of Wytches. Does this get you interested in picking up the book? If you've already read it, let us know. What part of this book really hit home the most for you. But again, closing out tonight, Lewis. Dude, it's been a freaking blast.
It's been a pleasure. I'm down for doing this again anytime, dude.
Yeah.
Anytime. Just let me know. I would love to have you in my channel as well, if you would like to. I mean, this was awesome.
No, I would certainly be down for that, man. And it's been a pleasure. I can't thank you enough. It's always great getting to collaborate with new guys. If you guys haven't already, there's a link in the description also to go check out Lewis's channel, the Geek Fortress. He does comic book reviews, unboxings, collectibles. He was one of the guys that got to go to the Titans premiere when it came out, so we chatted about that for a little bit. Really great content, really goes into depth and really finds a great way to topic out his conversation. And hopefully we'll be able to work out another time for Lewis to come on, because fortunately we both live on the East Coast. So
yeah, that helps a lot. That helps a lot.
Big time. Yeah. But just, closing out, Lewis, thank you. Thank you to everybody watching this live and to those of you who are watching this later. And don't forget to let us know in the comments what you thought of Wytches. If you've read it, let us know what part really hit home for you. But this is going to be Dark Knight Nation and the Geek Fortress closing out for the night. Thank you guys for watching.
Take care, guys.